expires in March 2026 and is now being reviewed. The Reserve Bank of India has released an in-depth discussion paper, and the key questions include: should India target headline inflation or core inflation? What should be the acceptable level of inflation? And should the inflation band remain the same? Let's begin with why inflation targeting matters. High inflation acts like a regressive tax, hurting poor households the most. It erodes savings, distorts investment decisions, and reduces overall economic stability. India has been focusing on inflation management since the end of automatic monetization in 1994, which gave the RBI greater autonomy. In 2016, India formally adopted FIT, and since then, inflation has broadly stayed within range despite major shocks. This stability itself is a significant achievement. One recurring debate is whether the RBI should target headline inflation, which includes food prices, or core inflation, which excludes food and fuel. While many argue that food inflation mostly comes from pull shocks, that is not always true. In an expansionary monetary environment, food inflation can rise sharply. Historical episodes in India show that high food deflation can influence wage demands and raise core inflation through second-round effects. Milton Friedman's famous argument reinforces this: general price levels do not rise unless money supply expands. When food inflation pushes up wages and spending, it can raise overall inflation if liquidity is allowed to grow. So, protecting savings and shielding the poor means headline inflation must remain the target. Now, what is the acceptable level of inflation? Some argue that a little inflation may support growth, but beyond a point, inflation hurts growth sharply. Studies using India's post-1991 data show a nonlinear relationship between inflation and growth, with an inflection point around 3.98%. This suggests that roughly 4% inflation remains appropriate for India. Preliminary simulations of future conditions up to 2030 also indicate that pushing the target above 4% has little justification. Finally, what about the inflation band of plus or minus 2%? This band has offered the RBI enough flexibility, but staying near the upper limit around 6% for too long defeats the purpose of FIT because growth falls sharply beyond that point. The success of FIT also depends heavily on disciplined fiscal policy. India's high inflation in the 1970s and 1980s resulted from monetizing fiscal deficits. Reforms like ending ad hoc treasury bills, introducing the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, and later adopting FIT were all designed to prevent that. Both FRBM and FIT must work together. Weakening one weakens the other and risks macroeconomic stability. The takeaway is clear: India's flexible inflation targeting framework works best when the 4% target stays firm, headline inflation remains the focus, and fiscal discipline continues.